Howdy, welcome back to the shop. Today I'm going to start a little project series here, making pipe clamps, or the ends for pipe clamps. Now Harbor Freight has got these for about $12 a set for the cast iron ones. I don't particularly enjoy using them too much. Uh, they break pretty easy. I broke several. Uh, I don't like the threads on the handle. They're just they work. They work great until it's midnight and you have to use that one last clamp and the threads strip out or you break the handle off of it. So I'm building some, and I think so far I'm building a batch of 10 of the dum dum end, and I'll probably build about 14 or 16 of the end with the screw in it, because I've still got a lot of dum dum ends that I just threw them in a toolbox. I found a bunch of them the other day, but I've stripped off the handles or broke the handles or whatever. So to get started, I mean, right here is what we got. Works pretty slick until you drop all the pieces. I suppose if I was really smart about things, I would install a small spring, drill a hole in my washer here and put me a small spring keeping this pulled forward. But I do I can use my hand on it. That's no big deal. These hold really well. I haven't been able to make one of these slip, and I have clamped this down very, very tightly. Uh, so these don't slip. So let me show you how I got started on these. Okay, let's just start with the washer. Now this is just a standard, I believe it's a 1-inch, it's either 7/8 or a 1-inch flat washer. I laid a piece of 1/4-inch key stock on this and just marked a line, and then cut the end of the bottom of the washer off with a cutting torch. You know, you just flame it off and then grind it to where it's nice and flat. Um, and then after you get them all ground, cut, and cleaned up on the cut end, I've taken them over to the drill press and clamped them in the vise and drilled this to an 1 and 3/32 drill. Now that 1 and 3/32 is going to be important because that's the size that you need to drill this 1-inch pipe out to as well. Okay, so this is just standard old Schedule 40 1-inch pipe. And I just cut it off with regular old pipe cutters. A little bit of black cutting oil, that way it stinks good. But this is just cut 2 inches long, 1-inch. 1-inch pipe, 2 inches long. And I kind of cleaned the burr off the inside of this with just a regular old step drill. And now this works really good, and it's a whole lot easier than using the Rigid brand hemorrhoid remover deburr tool. Or at least it is for me. My deburr tool is probably 60 years old, and it works, and it does a fine job, but this is a whole lot easier, a whole lot faster. So 1-inch pipe, 2 inches long, deburr the hole. Okay, now this is just 1.5-inch angle iron, nominally eighth wall or eighth thick. I came in and I scribed 3/8 from this edge and just made me a mark and scribed it. And then I flamed out with the torch and cut these to, I believe, 2 3/8 long. 2 1/4, 2 3/8. And that gives you this little piece here. That's what retains your washer. Beg your pardon. So anyway, this piece here makes this, and this piece here gets welded on like so and makes the bottom piece. And I'll show you how to do that next. So this, the piece, the 2 3/8 or so piece, 2 1/4 inch piece, you just kind of put it in your vise, center it up, clamp it, tack it a couple of times, and then after you get it tacked on there decent, just go ahead and solid seam weld it. A lot of this is going to get ground off after a while anyway, but just weld it on there. And then the way that I found to space this after some trial and error was I just took a scrap of 1/4 inch and ground me a little bevel on it to clear the radius down here. That sits in there like that to where it clears that radius. And then this gets held up there. And can't remember exactly how I clamped all that together, but you get the idea. That sets your spacing to where all of those spaces are consistent. And this is not really critical. This just needs to be about 1/4 or 3/16 or 3/8 of an inch of a stick out here. And I did grind this square and made sure that it was square. And I think I ground it to 5/16, but it was, the squareness is critical. This length is not really terribly critical. And this is not terribly critical, but you do want this piece on there square from the center line of this to this. And I just eyeballed it. I mean, I can eyeball square enough. So there's a piece that's been welded together there. Like I said, you can see, this is 1/4 inch from here to here, and that's on there fairly square. Now this piece here is nominally, it's 1/4 inch thick, and it's nominally, I put this one on wrong, I think, but it's 2 inches by 1 3/4 inches. And it doesn't really matter. It can be 2 inches by 2 inches. It can be whatever you want to make it. I just happened to have a bunch of drops that were 1 3/4 inches wide, so I made them 1 3/4 inches by 2. So, to make this, the first thing I did was sit down and I welded my ears onto this piece, and the ears are 1 inch by 2 of 1/4 inch thick steel. And all of this stuff came from the scrap pile. And it's drilled and countersunk for a number 6 screw, I believe. So it's, drilled and countersunk for a number 6. And, I just clamped this in the vise, eyeballed her for square, tacked it, welded it. And then once I got that done, then I stood this up in the vise like so, with my jaws clamping like this. And you want to make this edge here flush with the top of this. At least that's how I did it. And the idea behind this is these things are going to cock over a little bit under clamping force. So there's going to be a block of wood screwed here. So you want to make this to where if your angle is a little bit weird, you can adjust your block to where the block doesn't bottom out on this. So after I got all that done, I turned this, let me think here, like so in the vise, clamped it in a vise, and tack welded it here. Eyeball everything for straight and square, tack welded on this end, and then pull it up, take it out of the vise, and I tapped it with a hammer on the back side here, and then tack the backside. So I don't know if you can see from the camera, but this is to the center line of this. This is leaning that way some. Let me see if I can, yeah, you can kind of tell. But it's leaning that way about a fat 1/16 of an inch that way from being square. And that's, again, this has got a little bit of rock to it when you put it under a load, because you got to have a little bit of slop in this hole. So it needs to have enough slop in it to start with, or enough out of square that it's square when pressure is applied. So after you get all this welded up, now the fun part begins. You want to reach in the holes here and deburr any blowout and weld over and, dingleberries. And this is what I use instead of an air grinder. This is just a carbide burr, a Christmas tree burr, and this is a Harbor Freight 1/4-inch trim router. I like this better than the using the air grinder on it or my air die grinders. It spins just as fast, but I don't have to hear the air compressor roar. So this is what I use instead of air compressor and a die grinder. Just go in there and clean that up a little bit. So here's my setup for drilling these out. Okay, this assembly's been welded together, and so anyway, here's how I kind of set her up to drill them out. I'm going to flip my drill into reverse here. And again, this is an inch and 3/30 drill bit. That's how I set it up. Anyway, you know how to drill a hole, but that's how I set those up. Once you get it drilled, after that, now I just took torch and zipped this off to where it had a nice looking radius there. And that's why I wasn't too terrible concerned with this area here, like on this one. Some of these had big nasty booger hooks on them and things. So I just put those on the part that I was going to cut off, but I left this until I was done with everything else. And then we'll get around over here and I'll show you the next step. So this is pretty much, this one is ready to, I'm about finished with this, as finished as it's going to be. I'll do a separate video on, I guess, cutting these off or cutting the pads out. It's basically just going to be a circle of wood, and I'll just screw it on there with a couple of screws and call it good. I kind of like the idea of putting a wood face on these, because when I'm clamping something, I'm always hunting around for a scrap of wood to stick in there so my clamp doesn't mar my surface. So why not just have a clamp with a wood face on there, use it until it gets boogered up, throw it away, put another wooden face. That way you're not hunting for the wood face. But there you are. And I'll do another video on the finish. What I intend to do is I will soak this. When I get them all done, I'll throw all these in a bucket full of Ofaso, and that'll take off all the mill scale. It'll make everything the same color. And then just kind of depending on the mood that hits me, I'll either heat these up to about 400 or 500 degrees and throw them in a bucket of old motor oil, and we'll give it that kind of finish. Or we may just use Ofaso finish, I don't know. but we'll get there when we get there. All right. Thanks for your time, guys. You all have a good one. Drive safe. Watch for deer.